Good morning, everybody. Welcome. I hope you can all hear me okay. Thank you very, very much for joining us. Those of you who don't know, my name is Ben Willows. I'm the Chief Executive at UKSA. I'm going to spend literally just a couple of short minutes introducing today's session, and then we're going to be handing over and running through and hearing from some really well-informed people. We've got some great speakers on the webinar this morning who are going to be talking a little bit more about their experiences about this really important issue. But first of all, I'd just like to thank all of the team behind the scenes who've worked really hard in putting this together for us this morning, particularly the team from UKSA and Seafarers and ISWAN and everyone involved at Nautilus as well. Really, really pleased for everyone's hard work and collaboration and spending a bit of time talking about what's a really important issue. I guess I just wanted to start actually with a statistic that came out from the Key Crew report recently completed at the end of last year. And I think this brings a bit of context to what we're going to be talking about this morning. 54% of respondents that came back on that survey said that mental health has either significantly or somewhat deteriorated since working in yachting. And that's a statistic that really shines a light on the importance of this issue. And obviously that data in terms of the people that filled in that survey is showing that over half of people who go to work on super yachts are negatively impacted, and that's something that I hope and I think that everyone on this call, on this webinar, is committed to doing something about and changing. UKSA and Seafarers Charity, we began actively working together on crew welfare at the start of 2023, and we had an industry roundtable which actually helped us realise in 23 that actually our work had only just begun, and hearing all of the feedback and stories from the various stakeholders that we managed to pull together showed that there's a lot more we can be doing and should be doing in this area. That led us to forming the Changing Tack on Crew Welfare Working Group last May. And here we are today. That group includes UKSA, Seafarers Charity, ISWAN, Nautilus International, and so pleased, as I said at the beginning, to be collaborating and working with such a brilliant team and influential organisations that can make a positive difference in this area. And I think one of the key bits for us actually is really making sure that what we get out of sessions like today and working in this area is enhanced crews, understanding and awareness of the range of support that exists for welfare challenges. And there is already some great services, particularly what ISWAN and Nautilus are doing, some great services out there. And we want to make sure that the crew are aware of those and able to access it and know where we can signpost crew to if they are facing challenges whilst out working. From our end as a training organisation at UKSA, we've seen a real increase in the issues that crew are facing every day. And our welfare team are working pretty tirelessly and flat out on supporting crew and students whilst they're here training with us. And it's really interesting, and we'll hear a bit more about this as we go through today, about how the issues that are facing our students is actually changing and has changed over the last 12, 18 months, 2 years. And particularly students struggling with their mental health, particularly around anxiety, low mood, body dysmorphia, and experiencing such as issues like bullying and quite what can be difficult, sometimes toxic cultures on board. And as I said a moment ago, sessions like today and collaborating with expertise and organisations is all about signposting to crew and making sure crew are aware of the type of support services that are out there. And what we want to do on this webinar is actually shine a bit of a light on some of the stats and the stories, and we're going to hear firsthand from people with experience about their time in the industry this morning, which I hope and expect is going to be really powerful and eye-opening for a number of us. And actually we're hearing also about some of the recommendations, what we can all do to improve conditions for crew, leading to better well-being and ultimately just a better experience whilst on board, because it should be these should be fantastic work environments, getting to travel and see the world on fantastic yachts. It should be something that is a fantastic experience for people, and what we're hearing too often is that's not the case, and we really want to make sure that we're working collaboratively together to try and change some of those experiences. But I think there will be potentially a bit of time at the end for questions, but as we go through on the webinar today, please make sure you write any questions you have through in the chat box, and we'll do our best through the speakers and through the team behind the scenes to answer those as we go. And I think at this stage, what I'd like to really now do is introduce Melanie White. Mel is a super yacht chef previously, an author, and really excited because Mel's going to talk a little bit more about her experiences about working in the industry. So Mel, thank you very much for joining us this morning, and I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Ben, and good morning all. As Ben said, I'm Mel, and I'm going to take you through a little bit about what it's like to work on board luxury yachts. I started my career in luxury yachting 10 years ago, initially as a stewardess, and then very quickly moved into the position as yacht chef, and basically learnt that role on the job. Before I go deep diving into that, I'll give you a bit more of a broader scope of what I've been doing across those 10 years. But I decided to leave the industry in early 2020, just before the pandemic hit, with a view to trying to raise people's awareness around the mental health of seafarers. And that was largely because I realized that my experience, particularly at the beginning of my career, wasn't just me that was experiencing it. There were other people, once I started opening up, who had experienced similar things. So I kind of left the industry with a view to try and put a lens on that area. And I wanted to do that in 3 ways. One of those ways was I wanted to publish my story. So I did that via writing a book called Behind Ocean Lines, and then put a lot of effort into trying to find a publisher in order to get that book published. I realized occasionally there'd be articles that would come out in the news, there'd be a big clickbait interest, and then things would die away and people would be left with relatively little knowledge of really what was going on board. And so I felt it quite important to at least put my story out there so that there is a face to a story, and people feel confident that they can share their stories, and it'd be okay to not do that anonymously if they feel comfortable to. The other way in which I wanted to tackle this with mental health and seafarers was I wanted there to be practical change on board. And so with another yacht chef, Emma Ross, we co-founded Seize the Mind, which is a mental health first aid training company. And through Emma, we train lots of seafarers, lots of yacht crew in mental health first aid. So some practical tools that they can take on board and understand their own mental health and perhaps the mental health of those around them. Quite crucially, something that gets often misinterpreted about mental health first aid is the idea that you then become a therapist on board. That's not the case. It's more giving people the tools to properly understand a variety of mental health conditions and what that might mean. And then the third kind of angle was I wanted to look into policy. So I managed to get a job as a policy advisor at the UK Chamber of Shipping. And I worked there specifically in employment matters. And during my time there, with the help of also Nautilus International and the RMT Union, we published the mental health guidelines to implementing mental health policies in shipping. And during my time at the UK Chamber of Shipping, it was a really good opportunity to work with some of the people that have actually written the MLC, have made the changes in the STCW historically, and understand the lineage of where all the policies have come from and why there are all the stumbling blocks that we kind of see along that route. So those are my 3 areas that I wanted to tackle. And then in 2022, I gave birth to my son, Alf. And so I've taken a step back a little bit and have been freelancing with many fingers and many pies, and trying to make sure I still keep going with this kind of mental health advocacy work. So that's a bit about me over the last 10 years and why I might be qualified to take you through working on board, and particularly mental health on board. So rewinding it back a little, as I said, I started as a stewardess. I quickly realised that, unfortunately, in the stewardess position, there is a lot of kind of upstairs, downstairs, and a lot of thinking that you probably don't have a brain if you're doing all the cooking and serving, which absolutely isn't the case. But I felt that I wasn't being utilized and wasn't being challenged in the way where I could get a lot of job satisfaction out of it. And so when the opportunity came to move into the galley, I took it. That brought its own pressures. And I think anybody that works in kitchens per se will say there's a lot of pressure in delivering fine dining. But particularly on yachts, you are constrained with how much you can fit on the yacht, where you can provision what you're getting on board. You're operating as a 5-star service, but without an unlimited pantry and unlimited suppliers. And so that really took a lot of mental effort initially to really find my way and how that would work. Another area of pressure initially when I started on board was I was working primarily on sailing yachts. I really loved that. I loved that it was so active and allowed me to express other areas that I might be talented in and learn on the job. And so another area of pressure was learning to sail whilst also doing my full-time job as a yacht chef. I'd often be required on deck to help with sailing. We'd be often entering regattas where I'd be an active member of crew. Docking, for example, I'd be required on board on deck. And so particularly in the sailing yacht sphere, there is a lot more all hands on deck when there are limited crew members. So I would often find my duties split with having to leave sauces on the hob, running upstairs, helping with the anchor, whatever was needed, and then coming back down and trying to pick up where I was left off. So sailing was also another pressure, not least we did a lot of nautical mile sailing, a lot of deliveries. So even when there wasn't guests on board, it was completely full-time work. The third pressure was also the team. So the crew really are, I think, the most important part of the boat. And I think the success of a boat really lives and dies with its crew. And for me, in my experience, when I first entered yachting, I was working underneath a particularly difficult captain who was particularly abusive. And a lot of that abuse and harassment was directed at me, which meant that clouded over how well I could actually do my job and learn. So in my first 18 months, it was a really tricky situation where I was trying to excel. I was trying to start this new career, but also feeling an oppressive character on board that didn't let me thrive, even though that really is part of their job. It's really important to note at this point other factors that can combine into why people might experience poor mental health. And one of those is also I was not getting enough sleep. So working big hours, 16, 18-hour days, not getting enough sleep. And I was spending all this time caring for others, making sure everyone else was getting their food, making sure the crew was getting their food, and not taking the time for myself to be able to sit down and eat properly. And so my nutrition was also suffering. So all of these complex things on board really had their contributing factors in me starting to feel mentally unwell and unfortunately, at one point, I was contemplating suicide. Now, I think everybody who will probably be on this call will be aware that there are stats and things that go around online about how difficult it is around this topic to talk about it, that it often goes too far and then you can't speak to the people who have made these decisions to take their own life. So that's part of the reason I don't want to skirt around the issue. That did happen for me, but I did come the other side of it. And I did continue working in yachting for another 3.5 years full time, 11 months straight a year. So it is possible to come the other side of it. I think the biggest thing that allowed me to have a moment of fresh air to think, oh no, I can do this, is there was a change in management. So the captain did leave that boat and a new captain came in. And that opened up a much better working dynamic on board that allowed me to thrive. And so that's often, when I speak about this topic, a really important thing. And I think that's why it's great that we've got people in the industry like Kelly, that really great leaders that are making sure that their crew are taken care of, and is often quite a key part that I say in making sure people are mentally well on board. So like I said, that person had been removed, a new captain came in. And I think it's really important that we understand that we're living with these people all the time. It's not like when you work on land and you can, if you've got a bit of an abusive boss, you're probably going to come home again at the end of the day and have a bit of respite. If that bullying culture is on board, it's never leaving you. It's there when you wake up, you're getting very little sleep, and you're getting 18 hours of it a day. So this is why bullying and harassment policies are so important on board. And it's also really important that when we're nurturing and fostering people into moving up the ranks in yachting and taking the leadership positions, that they are creating a culture of care on board for the crew around them. Now, I think it's really important to distinguish there being a culture of care versus there being a family atmosphere. A lot of people want to say, oh yeah, well, we're family. But actually, if you say you're family, you can sometimes skirt over some quite deep issues and really swipe them under the carpet as a, yeah, but we're family, it's fine, right? We can put up with whatever. If you're creating a culture of care on board, you are naturally making sure you look out for each other in a way that creates a good bond and allows everybody to work well. And I think that is one of the key bits that has to be there in yachting. I think particularly with yachting in general, you have to pull together in order to get the job done. You know, we're not sailing these boats on our own. And so it does require everybody pulling their weight. And I think often when people are struggling with their mental health, they might not be pulling their weight because they aren't supported well enough in order to do their job. So by ensuring everybody's feeling mentally well, the whole team work well, and it really makes a huge difference. I think one of the other brilliant things about having a positive leader there with you is that they can allow you to have agency in your role. And one of the biggest things that changed my mental health once I had a good mentor on board was that they allowed me to show up to work as my true self. I was able to work authentically in a way that suited me, but with guidance. And I think when we can allow people to explore how they work without pressures of kind of barking orders, as opposed to asking what or how they might feel best doing something, it allows a bit more agency and people to come and show up authentically as themselves. Now, that's not to say there should be any compromise in safety. When it comes to proper maneuvers with the boat, with the way you need to sail all together, it's undeniable. There is one voice in charge and it has to be like that. But when there's the opportunity of people working outside of that sphere, when there are not set protocols and procedures, that they can present as themselves. Another thing that I always like to say as a kind of take home for people that aren't necessarily working in yachting, but support people that are, is when you're interacting with them, they might be your friend, they might be a family member, whoever they are, to interact with that person and really ask how they are. Quite often, because you're not seeing this person, they're off traveling the world, you see only the social media clips, the first thing you might want to ask is, oh, did you have anyone famous on board? Or, oh, was it, you know, what are the juiciest stories from this? Is it really like below deck? Blah, blah, all these questions that quite often come up, but aren't really focusing on that person as an individual. And it's actually really asking, are you okay? How's your season been? How's it going on board? What are the dynamics like? That you can interact with that person and give them the opportunity to open up if they're finding it difficult. If people aren't given that opportunity to raise their hand and say, I'm actually finding this really hard and I need the support. If they haven't got a notice board that has the Yacht Crew helpline on it, or information for Nautilus International, which none of the vessels that I worked with at the time had that information, or Yacht Crew helpline didn't exist at the time, there is very little opportunity for that person to be able to say if they're struggling. And so it's in those minute interactions that you can really make a difference. I think ultimately, it's a fantastic industry to be in. My book only covers really my first 18 months and the realities of luxury yachting. But it's really important to say that I had a really, really fulfilling career after that point. I still worked very big hours. I lived on board full time. All of those things that couldn't change didn't change. I just had much better support around me on board, and that made the world of difference. So I would like to say thank you to this point of everybody that's helped me have such a fantastic career in yachting. And I really hope that my story is not necessarily one that deters people from yachting, but actually gives them the opportunity to say, okay, this is what it can be like, and here's how we can make a difference. With that in mind, thank you for listening to me. More than happy to take questions, and if you put them in the chat, that would be absolutely fantastic, and we'll get to those at the end. Otherwise, I'm going to hand over to Martin now.
Thank you, Melanie. I'm just going to share a PowerPoint presentation, which should be in front of you now. My name's Martin Gray. I'm Director of Organising at Nautilus International, and I'm going to take you through some data that we've collected, some data that we've collated with ISWAN's Yacht Crew Helpline for 2022, some recent data that we have for 2023, and talk to you about where we see the problem existing based on real world information that's available to the organisations that are working as part of Changing Tack, and a little bit of information that's come from beyond. So for the combined data for 2022 and 2023, it represents over 800 unique inquiries with a reasonable distribution on gender and nationalities across the large yacht and super yacht sectors. We've combined categories to what you see in front of you as being the main occurrences and categorizations of inquiries that both organisations have received, so that we've got consistency across the data. And these are the primary inquiries, the primary reasons behind why our members and why Yacht Crew contact ourselves and ISWAN looking for support, advice and guidance. The combined data for 2022 is on screen in front of you, and you can see that there are a number of causes for concern in this data from 2022 to do with salaries, to do with assault, bullying, harassment, discrimination, contract issues, unfair discipline, but also heading up the list, we've got quite a large number of inquiries for hours of work and rest, mental health challenges, physical health challenges, injuries in the workplace, legal safety and major maritime incidents, with a large amount coming under the miscellaneous or other categories, because these are inquiries that are so small as to not be able to be categorised in the major headings. So there's a large number of quite unique inquiries that come into both organisations that are seeking some particular guidance or support from. We can break that down further so you can see a split. For 2022, of note, we've got, again, a high number of miscellaneous or other, but the key ones that came through for that year were unpaid and underpaid wages, assault, bullying, harassment, discrimination, contract issues, and unfair discipline. Now, moving further through to the Nautilus inquiry data for 2023, we can see that just inquiries into Nautilus International, we get an awful lot of crew coming to us about unpaid and underpaid wages. Almost, well, over a fifth of the inquiries that we received for 2023 were surrounding this challenge and this particular issue as a primary reason for contacting us. Cases that can be categorised as assault, bullying, harassment or discrimination, seeking advice and guidance on that, amounted to a combined 18.3%. Those with, again, contract issues that have got contract questions or were having some concerns that they weren't being treated in accordance with their contract and contracted terms and conditions, 16%. Unfair elements of discipline, 14.2%, with, again, hours of work and rest wrapping up these challenges, 8.1% of inquiries. So this is real world data of number of inquiries that come into us across 2023, with the top 5 issues listed here. The full graph of those that we've categorised out for 2023, we can see that there's some issues here. In 2022, there was a large amount of sanctions-related inquiries that came into us, but these became less relevant and less numerous in 2023 as the situation involving sanctions relating to Russia and Russian citizens were still in effect, and therefore the number of inquiries were slowly tailing off. But you can see that there is a large scale of problem at this lower end of the chart that's in front of you, and you can see a breakdown that we've put in for bullying, discrimination, sexual assault and non-sexual assault as being wrapping up as a significant challenge across those key points. Now, if we go to data that come in from the wider maritime industry between 1995 and 2002, we can see when it comes to assault, bullying, harassment, discrimination and unfair approaches to that, our numbers that we're receiving in terms of inquiries from both 2022 and 2023 are in keeping with data that goes back as far as 1995 in a study of studies that's taken place. So there is a large amount of challenge in that space in terms of assault, bullying, harassment, discrimination, and toxic attitudes and toxic approaches that are ongoing on board in the large yacht and super yacht sector, which need to be dealt with. You can see that there's a large number of unpaid and underpaid wages and contract issues, or so-called black and white issues and challenges, where there is a definitive answer that can come from that, as either it is in accordance with contracted terms and conditions or it isn't, or the wages that should have been paid haven't been paid, or there are definitive answers to these questions. But we see assault, bullying, harassment, discrimination inquiries across both organisations in 22 and continuing into 2023, and already our early data for 2024 indicates that this is still a prevalent problem. And we can see that also, based on research by the International Transport Workers Federation, the European Transport Workers Federation, and in the United Kingdom, the Trade Union Congress, assault, bullying, harassment and discrimination in the workplace are typically underreported. So the true scale of problem that is being faced in the industry with these statistics is likely more than what we're actually receiving inquiries about. Again, with unfair discipline and assault, bullying, harassment and discrimination, these are quite subjective challenges that need to be faced and can be open to elements of interpretation both by owners, managers and those that are on board. But these are challenges where people are still feeling that they are encountering issues that need to be addressed and should be addressed through the way that approaches are taken in dealing with them, dealing with crew and dealing with management and leadership on board large yachts and super yachts. Many of the inquiries that we receive, honestly, could be categorised under multiple headers as there are interlinked and related questions. The numbers that we've used for mental health inquiries are probably lower than what they are in actual fact if we start counting multiple inquiry points, because many of those with unpaid and underpaid wages are also going through challenges with mental health because they are wondering how they are going to be able to pay the bills, their entitlement to that, and that's having knock-on impacts. Same with assault, bullying, harassment, discrimination can also be categorised as seeking help and support with mental health because of the impact it's had on them and because of the impact it's had on them and their personal lives. Again, what we see with a lot of the challenge is dealing with them is going to be key to resolving a retention and recruitment challenge that the industry is facing at the moment, with further data sets being established as we're moving along, as we're working in partnership with ISWAN, and as we're working in partnership with other organisations, deliver meaningful statistics so we understand the scale and the scope of the challenge that we're actually dealing with in the large yacht sector, and trying to address how we can approach those challenges and how we can deliver meaningful change for those that are in this fantastic industry. Now, I'm going to give you a snapshot from the Key Crew Mental Health on Board survey, where you can see, in terms of contributing factors to mental health on board, there are a large number that are reporting burnout and fatigue. And as we heard from Melanie, that is a huge challenge that is on board yachts, and people being worked to a point at which they cannot cope with the workloads and should not be expected to have to cope with the workloads. But a large amount of crew tension politics, a large amount of what's perceived to be poor leadership, a lack of support, low team morale, all are huge contributing factors to mental health challenges that's on board large yachts and super yachts, and it's a huge challenge in, again, retention and recruitment of crew, as well as in the health, well-being and safety of crew that are on board these vessels. So this is where some of the data sources have come from. Again, I've gone through the presentation quite quickly because nobody particularly enjoys a PowerPoint presentation. I'm happy to take questions about the information that's been provided in the survey towards the end, and we'll keep an eye on the Q&A session for those with specific questions about the data to see what response I can give. What I'd like to do now, slightly ahead of time, however, is hand over to Captain Kelly Gordon and thank her also for joining us at this fantastically early time of the morning for her, where she is based in the East Coast of America. So, Captain Gordon, if I could ask you to take the room, please.
Thank you so much for having me, and good early morning. The sun is not even up over here on this side of the pond. But no, I'm hugely passionate about making the yachting industry a better place for your mental health space. Let me first start by saying that I absolutely love this industry. This industry has been life-changing for me. There's not been a day in the last 15 years that I haven't jumped out of bed wanting and ready to go to work. Sometimes I don't jump as fast and sometimes I don't jump as high, but I have always loved my job, continue to love my job. And that, for that reason, is probably one of the reasons that I'm so passionate about trying to push forward the change in mental health. But if I'm to be completely honest, unfortunately, like myself, like Melanie, I was suicidal at one point in my life, and I did make an attempt to take my life. And I came out like Melanie on the other side of that. I put the work in. I went into intensive therapy and spent years putting the work in to get this right, and continue to put that work in. And I am the happiest I have ever been. And I have been saying that for several years now. And so I find it, I hope that you find it useful that when I share my story of where I was and where I'm now, that maybe it encourages or inspires you to, if you are in a tough spot, to put that work in, to get the help, and to try to be better, because now, and I've been saying it for several years in a row now, I am the happiest I have ever been. So that's kind of really my personal reason or mission that I have taken on this mental health passion so much, is just because of personally where I was in life and now where I am in life. And when it comes to what goes on board, again, like I said, I love my job, I love the industry, but there is a lot of crap to it in this industry, and there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of mental health concerns. I find, and like Martin, I have resourced Key Crew's data frequently, and yes, one of the biggest problems on these vessels is the lack of leadership. And when there are a number of amazing boats out there, but there are a number of way less than amazing boats out there. And I really find that if we could start from the top and really try to help with that leadership piece. But I want to point something out, though, is when you say my captain's a bad captain, or my department head is no good and they're a terrible leader, none of us have been taught to lead. Specifically in this industry, I was taught to run a boat, navigate, and watch the weather specifically. That's my skill set. Melanie was taught to keep us all fed. The chief stews are taught to run the interior. The engineer is taught to keep the boat running. None of us are taught leadership. So I think that that is something industry-wide, and in every industry, actually, as you move up the ranks in any industry, you move up the ranks because of your skill set. And then, oh, by the way, now that you're up here at the top, you're supposed to be a leader too. Well, nobody told me that. Nobody, and much less somebody even taught me that along the way. So I just want to share that that's my personal take. What I see on why there's such a lack of leadership is we're not taught that. Us captains become captains because we like driving boats. And then, oh, by the way, now that you're here, you have to be mom, dad, camp counselor, psychotherapist, human resources, and you're the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company essentially now. So bearing with that in mind, I see a lot of issues. Being boots on the ground, the top issues that I see are, number one, drug and alcohol abuse, sexual harassment, and bullying. Those three are the top three. Yes, there's a lack of leadership. Yes, we get stressed. Yes, we work long hours. We burn out. But the three big ones are the drug and alcohol abuse, the sexual harassment, and the bullying. I see those as boots on the ground. I'm on board. Those are the things that are really, really causing a huge distress in crew. And I personally think and ask, why is it that the yachting industry hasn't taken a page out of the commercial industry's playbook and said that while you're signed onto a vessel, there's a no alcohol policy? Every other, when you go to work at the 9-to-5 job, you're not allowed to drink while you're there. If you're signed onto a vessel, why are you allowed to consume alcohol when you hit the dock that you're still signed on? Why is it that I have heard so many questions of drunk captains? I was called a couple of weeks ago by a young stew and said, I don't know what to do. My captain's snorting so much cocaine, his nose is bleeding all over the boat. These stories are true. These stories are out there. And unfortunately, you will encounter them along the way in the yachting industry. This is not to deter you from it. Again, and I'll say it again and again, this job has changed my life. It's amazing. But what can you do to prepare yourself for when you encounter this? What can you do when you encounter a crew member that's abusing drug and alcohol, someone that's sexually harassing you, someone that's bullying you? And I can tell you the number one thing that you can do, probably the hardest, but the easiest at the same time, is to speak up. Open your mouth and say, this isn't right, this isn't acceptable. And let me tell you, leadership has absolutely nothing to do with rank. So just because they're your HOD, just because you're the captain, let me tell you, chief anything or captain are not gods and goddesses of the sea, okay? So feel free, and you have a moral obligation to yourself and your crewmates to speak up when something's going wrong. Don't feel that you're gonna get blackballed, don't feel that you're gonna get fired. And you know what, if you do, that's fine, because if you're good at your craft, by the time you hit the end of the dock, you'll probably have a job on another vessel. So good leadership, what does good leadership look like? I can tell you how I start every single day on board. We spend the first 30 minutes of every day, as much as I'm sitting here panicking on the inside going, oh my God, we've got so much to do today, we really need to get started. 30 minutes every day at the beginning of the day, we either sit down and we have a laughing session, a joking session, or if something's going on within the crew and somebody's struggling, we sit down as a team. Like, we're tight, we're close. We sit down as a team, we discuss it, we hash it out. If I need to go talk to someone individually, I do. Or if a couple of the crew members need to break off on their own and speak about it. But every morning, every day, we spend time discussing what's going on in here with people, or we spend time laughing. That's probably one of the biggest things that I have found that I have done with my crew that keeps us functioning so well, so tight, so happy, is we laugh. We make a point to laugh every day. We make a point to really understand and know what is going on in everyone's lives. So good leadership is a leader that is vulnerable, that is open, that is honest. I have found that I have been so fortunate. I work at leadership. I study leadership. I read about it. I watch videos. I talk to my colleagues. But good leadership is someone that can lead with vulnerability and really expose themselves. And I have found that every day on board, if I'm in a good mood, if I'm in a bad mood, if I'm stressed, if I'm happy, I'm sad, everyone sees it. And when they see it, they feel that they can be that way too. And then we grow this comfort amongst each other that has really built this level of camaraderie to check in with each other and to take care of one another. So leadership, while it's tough, one of the simplest things, but the most difficult, is to be vulnerable yourself. And leadership, don't forget, leadership isn't just captains, it's not just HODs, it's from the top down and it's from the bottom up. So if you don't like the leader that you have, the least that you can do, regardless of your position, is be the leader that you wish you had. So that's kind of my, that's kind of where we are in the industry. Again, amazing industry. You will run into some challenges, but the best thing that you can do is work to prepare yourself to have the tools as to how you're going to approach these challenges head on. And the single most important thing that you can do is speak up. Probably the most difficult, but speak up. So I did not time myself. That's what I have. If you guys have questions at the end, I'll be so happy to take them. But now I would like to pass the torch to Chris Frisbee. Chris? I don't know if, can Chris hear me? Is Chris frozen?
Hi, Kelly. Thanks for that great presentation. Really interesting to hear about your experiences and your comments about leadership. Chris, can you hear me? I'm not sure if Chris is frozen. I think he has. So thank you very much, Kelly. I think we need to pass on to Simon now. Simon?
Sure, thank you very much, Tina. So I'm Simon Grange, I'm Chief Executive of ISWAN. You've heard some really good stories there about the kind of things that go on, and that's part of the motivation for Changing Tack, why we got together, why we wanted to do something about it. And what I want to talk to you now is a little bit about what we're planning, the ideas that we have, and hopefully how you can help us to achieve our aims. So ISWAN, well, we got involved in Changing Tack because of our work operating the Yacht Crew Help, 24/7 helpline service for yacht crew. And actually Yacht Crew Help came about as a direct result of a survey carried out 3 years ago on crew welfare. And that clearly showed that there was very little welfare provision available for yacht crews. The helpline's been well received. We can see the number of calls going up over the last 3 years, and it's providing some really useful insights into the issues that are faced by crews. Now at ISWAN, we're drawing on that data to develop new resources, such as the recent guide that we've published on personal safety precautions for job-seeking yacht crew. Now that came about in response to some of the calls we were receiving from new crew who had experienced abuse, bullying, harassment, and even violence after taking on a new job, often via unregulated recruitment channels, such as through social media and crewing websites. Now, the guide aims to equip crew with a better understanding of their rights and how to access support. And we're keen to develop more of these kinds of services and preventative tools. So our aims and objectives are really closely linked with that of the Changing Tack Group. Now, a big challenge for the work of both ISWAN and Changing Tack is a lack of capacity to follow through on ideas. So we've developed a joint proposal for the recruitment of a project manager to give us the means to turn talk into action. This person, once appointed, would enable us to properly coordinate and focus our activities. They would take the lead on developing tools and resources, promote welfare at events, and implement projects in conjunction with all the relevant stakeholders. Data and insights from Yacht Crew Help will help to ensure that any services or resources that we develop are relevant and useful. I'm pleased to say that the Seafarers Charity are currently in the process of considering a bid for 50% of the cost of this person, and we're going to be looking for the other 50% from within the industry. So please do consider whether you or anyone else in your networks would be interested in supporting this proposal. Changing Tack has also prepared a proposal for the development of a welfare hub in Antibes. This exciting project is a collaboration between UKSA, ISWAN and Mission to Seafarers. There's already a well-established model in the merchant marine where a chaplain is placed in a port with a brief to offer assistance to seafarers of all backgrounds. They visit ships and offer welfare support, transport, shopping, legal and advocacy work. But we're going to adapt this model to the specific needs of yacht crews so that there would be a Mission to Seafarers chaplain as well as a UKSA team member on site to provide career support, mental health awareness, leadership, well-being and education. ISWAN's Yacht Crew Help will work with the hub, signposting cases from the helpline where we identify that actually that person really would benefit from some in-person support, and vice versa. The hub will be able to refer individuals to the helpline and ISWAN's resources and flag up any emerging issues for the development of new projects. To do this in Antibes, we would simply require space in a small office where the hub could be based. We need access to a small room for private conversations and some space for training as well. So if you can help with this, please get in touch with Chris Frisbee at UKSA. And again, Seafarers Charity are also considering an application for 50% of the costs of this project. So we're just looking for the other 50% from the industry. If you're interested in supporting this proposal, please talk to us. In the meantime, members of the Changing Tack Group will continue to develop these initiatives and we'll be attending events to promote the issue of welfare wherever we can. We're next speaking at the Super Yacht Investor event in May in London. Other ways in which you can help: promote the Yacht Crew Help service to crews. As somebody said earlier, it should be in the cabin everywhere so that people have immediate access to it. How about sponsoring Yacht Crew Help and the work of ISWAN to improve crew welfare? Or pointing us towards people or opportunities to promote what we're doing and collaborate on these projects. Please follow our updates, keep up to date with what we're doing. And if you've already got good welfare systems in place, something to boast about, how about letting us showcase them so that we can show that actually it can be done, good practice can be done. So we look forward to hearing from you. And in the meantime, I'm going to hand back to Tina to, well, it's going to field any questions, but if Chris is back, hopefully he'll be able to pop in. Tina, over to you.
Thank you, Simon. And the good news is that Chris is back with us. So I'm handing over to Chris, and thank you very much, Simon.
Hello all. Sorry about that. It was going too simple for everybody to have no IT issues. So I'm taking a slightly different tack here from a UKSA point of view, whereby we are seeing and training the young people that are actually going to work into the sector. So I just want to start with some figures of last year, 2023, around students that train to go and work in the super yacht sector. So we run a full mental health and welfare team at UKSA who are here to support the young people. So these people have not been in the industry yet. They're about to go into the industry. So if we take a look at this data from 40 students aged 18 to 24 over a 5-month period. So there was 176 support contacts were made with that cohort, which equates to 4.4 contacts each. However, some were obviously only supported on a couple of occasions. Now, if we look at the numbers on where they were supported and how many times, so 10 were supported on 5 to 10 occasions. That in itself, as you can see, is a lot of work. 8 were supported on 11 to 20 occasions. 6 of them were a serious cause for concern in relation to mental health. 13 of them needed contacts with external agencies, including mental health professionals, counselling services, and mental health support professionals. In relation to mental health in categories of anxiety, stress, and depression, support was specifically given to 14 of them. And in relation to self-harm, impact of suicide or suicidal feelings, support was specifically given to 5 people. So the reason I'm bringing this up is to emphasize that these young people that we are getting into the industry nowadays, they're not getting mental health issues when they're in the industry. We have people joining the industry already with mental health issues. And what we need to understand as an industry is how the training that we are giving to the young people, the training that the people on the boats, as we've just heard about, and making sure that we are equipped to deal with the young people that are going into the sector. So just some a bit more data here on the student comparisons between 2022 and 2023 at UKSA. So as you can see here, students supported has grown. The support contacts, so that's the amount of times we are having a contact with a specific individual, has grown. So it's taking more time to manage the young person. And the mental health training that we are delivering, of course, due to these issues, is also growing. So as Ben mentioned right at the beginning, the big ones that we're seeing, the increase is in their mental health, particularly anxiety, low mood and body dysmorphia. And we have seen an unfortunate rise in the impact of death by suicide of close friends or family. Now, that is something that we haven't seen at UKSA quite so much as we are seeing it now. And unfortunately, some of that is coming from the financial hardship, which is also evident. So I think, just to emphasise again, the need for training for young people going into the sector and for people already in the sector. Okay, so I just want to tell you what UKSA does and the why we do it. So all of our students attend a mental health and wellbeing for seafarers course. So any student that is going to work out in the industry takes part in that course. And that course is 2 things. It's how to look after yourself and how to look after others. We are seeing a huge success in that course. We deliver it really early on in their training so they can start implementing and learning how to deal with their own issues and issues of other people so that they are more prepared when they go out into the sector to do it. So all the students have one-to-one welfare support from trained professionals. So we have a welfare team here, which everybody can access confidentially. We also provide education and training to all students on where to get support once in the industry. So one of the things is we can give them all this great training, but if they don't know where to access more support when they get out in the sector, the training is irrelevant, and we need to make them understand where they can get their support from. We've now started training and promoting to all our officer, chief mate and master students. So anybody that is now working their way up the ladder, we are promoting the training to both them and their crews that are on board that have not come through UKSA. So the training that we're delivering for mental health and wellbeing, it is not just for students that are coming through UKSA. We also deliver that remotely to people that are already on boats, so we can do your crew, and we also come out to the vessels and deliver the training as well. And we're also currently working with yacht management companies. So we've got a few large yacht management companies who are already on board, which is great. And we're going to start rolling out this training across the vessels that they're managing. So that's really exciting and a step in the right direction. Because there is, of course, people who do not know that. I think the other thing, as we just heard from Kelly, is that you are not trained in able to deal with this when you are an officer or a master, and that is the next piece of the puzzle of what it is that you need. So if I go on to the sort of what do you need, we don't have all the answers sitting here, and we really need to hear from you, the sector, whatever part you're in, whether you are on board or whether you work shore-based, on the issues that you see, so we can collaboratively design training that is fit for purpose. So the areas that I've put it down is feedback on what you think new crew in the sector would benefit from, feedback on what you think would help officers and masters who are working out in the sector, who by the time you are now in the sector at working at that level, this training didn't exist and you wouldn't have gone through some of it. And I think the other big question that we need to answer, and I know someone has asked this as a question, is do you think that there should be mandatory training for mental health and well-being or mental health first aid training? So just to recap, as you can see from the short presentation there, these young people are already have issues, mental health and well-being circumstances before they are going into the sector. That's not just them going into the super yacht sector, that is any young person, unfortunately, going into any sector. And we need to be able to support them and also have the correct training to be able to support them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chris. So I think we now have some time for questions. And thank you to everybody who's put questions in the chat so far. Please feel free to add some more questions, and hopefully as we go through, some more questions may occur to you as well. So I'm going to start with the first question from Emma Gillette. And this is a question for Martin. Martin, I hope you're there. Yes, you are. Okay, Martin, this is a fairly higher level question, which is when do we see a global governing body to create a code of ethics and act as a deterrent to these criminal acts being perpetrated daily on board in our high resource industry? So when are we going to see a global governing body? Who's in charge, Martin? Martin, you're on mute. The first of the day, well done.
It's an excellent question, Emma, and thank you very much for asking it. It's a question I often find myself contemplating, which is when will we be able to centralise this? There are efforts, as I'm sure you're aware, that are going through the International Maritime Organisation at present when it's talking about assault, bullying, harassment, discrimination, seafarer safety, and also through the International Labour Organisation through conventions that have occurred, such as MLC and others. So there are elements that are coming together with that. As with anything that happens on a global level and a global scale, it requires international collaboration, cooperation, and agreement. That can be an extremely slow and laborious process, and quite often we end up with legislation that is imperfect in its approach and operation, that merely fits the requirements of the majority instead of the requirements of actually what the situation might necessitate. I would argue that we have, to a large extent, a lot of the tools that we need already with flag states to deal with some of these issues, but that not all flag states are dealing with them in a way in which they should, and that they should be better recourse against flag states who aren't following their obligations and upholding their own national rules on board yachts that fly its flag and are technically part of its sovereign status. So work is ongoing in that front with regards to IMO and ILO. but more needs to be done. But more also needs to be done to reaffirm and reinforce the abilities of flag states to actually follow through with their own obligations with regards to actually supporting crew where acts that are unlawful are ongoing, and supporting crew in dealing with perpetrators that persistently break the law and break the rules.
Thank you, Martin. I'd like to come to Mel now. We've got a couple of questions for you here, Mel. The first one is, have flag states been interested in your stories and to learn more about how they might introduce new standards to the yacht sector? So, that would be following on from the conversation about flag states and what are they doing? But also another specific question is, how do we hold perpetrators accountable for criminal actions on board on the high seas? There's a recent cruise ship case of a rape on board a Panamanian yacht where the perpetrator was reported to Spanish authorities. Ultimately, it came out that Panama needs to investigate, but they won't. This is the same for other big yachting flag states. Why are flag states not revoking MLC certification for yachts that blatantly disregard the MLC? Sorry, I tried not to. Please answer.
I'll go
I'll
with
just finish. I'll just finish. Oh, sorry, Melanie.
go for it. Go, Deborah, go.
I was going to say, I'll just finish the question, which was, why are flag states not revoking MLC certification for yachts that blatantly disregard the MLC, specifically bullying and harassment? And Mel, thank you. Over to you.
Thank you. So with the first one, I haven't had anyone from any flag states approach me or say that they've read the book. And so, to be honest, the answer is no. I would like to think that it would be nice that people across the industry have access to the book, especially as they are dealing with yachts in this sector regularly. And it's nice if there's a bit more compassion to really understanding what is going on board. With regards to the second question, I contacted my previous boss, who had done a lot of work and does a lot of work with the MLC in general, and they responded to me in order to inform you that obviously if a crime is committed on the high seas, it is the flag state's duty to investigate and prosecute. The problem, obviously, as you've outlined there, is that this rarely happens in practice. And also, since the MLC doesn't currently require ship owners to have an anti-harassment and bullying policies on board, there is no scope for cancelling a maritime labour certificate. But they are aware and are hoping to fix this, or open discussion to fix this, at the next special tripartite meeting, but next April. And I think, as Martin has said, when you're working across massive conventions and policies that a lot of people have to have a lot of input in and agree on minute wording, it takes a long time to get to that point. So I don't think that it's necessarily that people aren't thinking about this, but it takes a long time for that to happen in practice. And as a side note, obviously there's always been a lot of discussion about, why is there not mental health training in the STCW? I think that's quite widely accepted that it's necessary, some version of mental health training in there, but actually getting that through over 50 ratifying states of the STCW is a huge amount of work. So it just takes a lot of time, which is extremely aggravating. And this is where this work is so crucial, that we can kind of close around the industry and support it from the bottom up while we're waiting for the policy to come down.
Thank you, Mel, and sincere apologies, everyone, for my coughing fit. And thank you, Deborah, for filling in for me. Can I ask a similar question to Kelly, please? Have you had any interest from flag states about your work or any engagement with them at all? I mean, it may be not at all, but it would just be interested whether you've ever been reporting anything that you've come across.
In terms of any flag states supporting hearing my story and the outreach that I'm making and that kind of thing,
Yeah.
absolutely. Cayman Registry has been amazingly supportive. And actually, and I'm just going to go ahead and shout his name out here, Pete Southgate of Cayman Registry has actually become my mentor for this. And when I made the decision that I was going to go big or go home with this and run with it, and the talks and traveling around the world speaking about this and advocating for this, Pete Southgate of Cayman Registry was one that came to me. Also, well, and let me just go back, actually Ingle Jan de Boer of Lloyd's Register Yachting Division, those two men hunted me down at the Miami Boat Show the year before last and sat with me and my vessel for an hour and a half talking about how to make the change, who could make the change. And Pete Southgate has been a huge mentor, supporter, push for me to do what I'm doing about the awareness and helping crew and hopefully inspiring crew and encouraging and you name it, all that I'm doing. So yes, Cayman has been a huge supporter of my mission, so to speak.
That's great to hear that there are real advocates out there, championing crew welfare. None more so than yourself, Kelly. And actually, we have a direct question for you about the role of the captain. And the question is, what do you think is the most important thing that the industry can do to help captains create a better working environment for crew?
I think one of the things that it needs to be more clear when you decide that you're going to become a captain or you're going to go that route is there needs to be a clear job description. and that doesn't have to be a formal job description, but I think it needs to be known that, like I said, that yes, you're becoming a captain because you love to drive boats, but that is, and I said this the other day, I said 90% of our training pertains to 10% of our job. 10% of our training pertains to 90% of our job. So what I mean by that is all of our training is to drive, navigate, weather, that kind of thing. I take one 5-day course on leadership, and that's leadership in the bridge. That's not leadership of the whole boat. And so I come out with my certificate for my one 5-day course, and I'm like, okay, I'm ready to take on a vessel of how many crew. So I think there needs to be a clearer job description of hey, driving the boat is only about 10% of your job. The other 90% is what I call peopling. And so I think that could be a huge help. And then also providing more leadership training opportunities, which there are tons of companies out there doing this. So I think it needs to also be said that you also need to be self-aware, self-accountable. I spend a lot of time, I try to devote at least 20 minutes a day. And that 20 minutes adds up. At least 20 minutes a day, reading a leadership article, Googling a particular topic that was maybe tough for me in terms of management that day on board, or I have favorite YouTube channels that I love to watch about leadership. So I'm constantly doing my own self-education. And I think that we need to encourage crew that this is not a, you take the class to get the job and then you're done. You're a lifelong learner. And especially when you move up the ranks, don't wait on somebody to say, hey, you have to go take this class. Be proactive, have some personal accountability and say, oh, I might need to do some self-study on how to become a better leader. I do. So take a little less time on the social media, take a little less time Netflixing and chilling, and maybe even if you just put 20 minutes a day aside to read about a leadership topic or what you could do to become a better leader. I think that's probably the if you were to say single most thing that's important is to really encourage people to really take on leadership on their own and be responsible for educating themselves. Because when you take on that chief position, chief stew, chief officer, chief engineer, or you take on that position of master, you are automatically taking on the responsibility of becoming a leader.
Great. There's quite a bit of discussion in the Q&A about leadership as well. And Adam Parnell from Chirp has mentioned the Maritime Professionals Council's work on kind leadership, and Nautical Institute Academy's work on leadership and management courses. So there is some development of leadership training going on at the moment, but it's probably got some way to go.
You know, without even doing, let's say, formal coursework or formal study, I think that the single most thing you can do to become a better leader, which is probably one of the most difficult things, is to lead with vulnerability. Like I said earlier, I am me 100% of the time. And if I'm sad, the crew know I'm sad. If I'm grumpy, the crew know I'm grumpy. What that has done, if I'm happy, they know I'm happy. What that has done then is that has opened the door for them to be vulnerable and to show themselves. And that has just, leading with vulnerability and authenticity and just being myself 100% of the time has really, really helped. I think my team, I know it has. So I think that if you could just learn to lead with, vulnerability, that just changes the landscape so much.
Thank you, Kelly. Melanie, did you want to come back in on this subject of leadership?
Yeah, it was more about, taking the time to do the training and how you only get X number of days training and then you have to crack on. And it's also worth remembering, especially within yacht crews on good vessels, there's often a training budget, and sometimes that's not always taken up across all of the crew members. And so as a crew member, you can go forward to your leadership and say, is there a budget? Is there space for me to do X course? And can I book this in? I think being proactive and, like Kelly says, like, take the step to make sure you're proactive to learn yourself. It's not that the burden and everything always has to be on you, but you can look to your leadership and see if that cost can be borne by the yachts and take on training, even if it's beyond the scope of these are the bare minimum qualifications I need to do my job. Seeing whether or not you can upskill, whether it is in like mental health training or if it is in leadership techniques. Maybe you're not even there yet, but then you're kind of putting the groundwork in ahead of time, and also you're understanding what should be there and what your leaders should be doing. And it also it allows you to grow in that respect. So yeah, just making sure crew know that there might be a budget and to speak up and ask where that budget's going and can it go to them.
Great, thank you, Mel. Okay, I'm going to move on to Chris now. So Chris, it's clear that welfare issues aren't getting better, but there's been a focus on this for quite a few years. Why haven't they worked?
Yeah. Okay, I can give a personal opinion on this. So I agree, there has been a focus on welfare issues on board for quite a few years. I think there's two things for me. One is definitely since COVID, that young people now struggle more. So actually, although we have been doing some stuff and lots of very good stuff going on out there, we have got more people coming into the sector with mental health problems, as I mentioned previously. I actually think the second and actually the quite important thing is I believe that we are now in a far better position for the industry to want to change. There's people sitting here today that wouldn't be here if they weren't passionate about it and if they didn't want for there to be a change in the industry. And I do think that we are now in a position where we can make a difference because people want change. People understand the benefit of training. People understand that young people need support. So yes, I do think that there has been talked about for a few years now. I do believe we are now also in a much better position to do something about it, would be my answer to that.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, so when situations have arisen and people report, what happens then? We've got a question specifically about reporting, which is how easy is it for victims who call out such behaviours of superior on board and get fired to gain employment elsewhere? Would this not be on their record and affect their chances? Also, how often do cases where crew members record their experience on board and report it end up being successful? I suspect this might be one which either Martin or Simon would like to answer. Simon, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'd certainly like to. I noticed quite a few questions referring there to criminal investigations, criminal incidents, serious incidents of sexual assault, and the reluctance to deal. And I think there's two reasons for this. Primarily, it's the fact that people really struggle to know how to deal with these kind of incidents. Even when this is your day job, you know, you are used to, as a police officer, for example, these are difficult investigations to undertake. But then when you expect flag states and managers and companies and all these different people to get involved, there is a sort of like a rabbit frozen in the headlights. What do we actually do? I don't want to do anything wrong. So there's a real lack of guidance and understanding about how to deal with these type of complaints. So I think that's something that we could really benefit from getting some kind of guidance. Safer Waves, which is a welfare organisation, is currently working with one of the British police forces at the moment to come up with a protocol as to how these type of incidents should be dealt with. Now, it's a small step. You've got all the different jurisdictions as well around the world. What happens in international waters, it's really complex. But hopefully that will turn into some kind of template that could be used by others. And at the moment, they're carrying out a survey, Safer Waves, on such incidents. So it may be something you want to have a look at. And then, of course, inevitably, there is we've got to brush this under the carpet. This is not good publicity. Owners or owners' representatives are not going to want to see this sort of thing going on. They're not going to want to hear about it. But I think that is counterproductive, because if something gets out, if you get a really high profile case that gets out, the owners are not going to want that kind of publicity either. And I think, you know, it would be helpful to actually talk to owners and owners' representatives about, when these kind of incidents happen, how would you expect it to be dealt with? What would you want from us? Because that way you're actually opening up the conversation. It may be that actually they will come back and say something quite different to what is assumed is to, you know, just don't make a fuss, I don't want to hear about it. So, and then when we look at the whole issue of how do we change things, this is something that's got to happen at every single level. Welfare organisations can do so much, but that's very limited. This has got to be a commitment from everybody within the industry, and then some really good examples who are going to stand up and say, look, this is good practice. This is how we're going to deal with it, and then set the standard for others to achieve. So that's all I've got to say on it.
Okay, thank you, Simon. And actually, that links quite closely to another question, which I think Kelly may be able to help us with as well, which is, how do we make sure owners understand the gravity of the issue, as it seems they are hidden from it and made to feel like everything is perfect? Tell us about the owners, Kelly.
Okay, before I go there, there's one thing I wanted to say though about when crew members do speak up, when they finally speak out and they report something, from an on-the-ground perspective, captains have chat groups and we chat. We know the good captains, we know the bad captains. And if a captain does come into a chat group and try to blackball or oust a crew member, us good captains know and we consider the source, so to speak. So to crew members that are potentially worried, well, if I speak up and if I do get fired, then is that captain going to go to all of these chat groups and say, I did this and I'm that? If they do, which they don't all that often, but when I have seen them come through, the rest of us good captains, if you want to call us that, we know, and sometimes we kind of pounce. So don't let that fear of being blackballed, so to speak, discourage you from speaking up, because we know the behind the scenes part of that, if that kind of makes sense. And then you asked me about owners, keeping this away from the owners, and should we, was the question, should we or shouldn't we make the owners aware of this kind of thing?
Yeah.
Look, so we're in an industry where we're essentially the hospitality industry, and our goal and our job, the boat is the owner's happy place. You know, he or she's got a lot of stresses from their big businesses and everything that they've got going on in life. So they have these vessels to kind of go and decompress and get away from all of it. And so this is supposed to be their happy place, and we're supposed to make it the happy place. And I think that there is a balance of keeping them away from all of the woes and the details of this isn't working, that isn't working, mechanically on board, but then also being honest with what's going on with the cruise. For one, personally, I just tell it like it is. Always have been that way. And I was out with the boss last Saturday, and he asked about one particular crew member and how he was doing. And I was honest, and I told him, and he says, okay, be more specific. I was more specific. And so I pick and choose what I, so to speak, shield the owners from. And when it comes to my crew, I actually probably put my crew on a higher pedestal than I do the owner. And so if there's something that needs to be addressed, that needs to be said when it comes to the crew, I'm gonna let it be known. And because I think that we need to do a better job of educating the owners about these types of topics, and not being, and I get it though, it's a bit scary, because for the captain to bring something to the management company, you're afraid that if you make waves, you might lose your job, or for the management company to bring something to the owner, you don't want to lose that client. But at the end of the day, we have a moral obligation to do so, and we can't keep living in a workplace based on fear. So I paint the picture like it is, always have.
Great. Martin, would you like to come in and say something now about reporting crimes as well? And we've actually got a specific question for you as well, which is, what is the protocol that Nautilus follows when crew report cases of bullying, harassment, or abuse?
Thanks, Tina. I think I've remembered to unmute this time. So I'll start with the difficult thing, and I think that Captain Gordon's addressed it extremely well, which is that don't let the fear of what this is going to have potentially an impact on future opportunities dissuade you from reporting something that you feel needs to be reported. Because it's only by speaking out, it's only by highlighting where these challenges exist, it's only by trying to push for better to have these issues addressed, will the industry be aware of the issues, and will the industry seek to address those issues and challenges. And again, as much as the industry talks about what's going on, a lot of the industry knows where the challenges are, and in particular who the challenges are, and are aware as to how much salt that they need to take particular perspectives that might get shared in closed forums across with that. In terms of protocol for reporting bullying, harassment, discrimination, it can depend on the circumstances and the case. All too often, we find a lot of people who are reluctant to want to see, because they want to tell us about it, they want us to highlight that it's happened, but they don't necessarily want us to directly intervene, either for fear that it's not going to be dealt with appropriately, that they, again, are worried about the impact it's going to have on future career, and who have concerns that they are in a particularly vulnerable situation on board the vessel still whilst it's going on, where they fear that they might have further detrimental experiences, consequences, or even, you know, more severe physical violence expressed against them for making these reports and issues. Now, those instances where that occurs are still rare. We would always encourage people who believe that they're being subjected to bullying, harassment, assault, discrimination, if they're members of Nautilus, to reach out and contact us as soon as possible. Quite often, when it comes to bullying, harassment, and cases like this, It's been found in wider maritime as well as in yachting, actually having a conversation with an individual about what you're finding to be unacceptable about their conduct in the first instance is the way to get it resolved. A lot of reports and instances come through because people have not intended to do what they have done and have not intended it to be received in the way that it has done, and often addressing it at an early opportunity can resolve it and stop anything further from progressing. Equally, when that case goes forward, what we do is we look at working with the impacted crew member to highlight it on board, making sure they feel comfortable to do so, or highlight it appropriately elsewhere. So by highlighting it on board, if it's their head of department, it's potentially speaking to the captain if the captain is above the head of department. If the captain is the propagator, we look at getting them to have a conversation with shore-based management if that exists. Where shore-based management doesn't exist, it makes it more complicated. And a lot of what we can do is give them support and guidance on trying to address the issues and build up an evidence base and a support base so that when they feel ready to go forward with complaints or other challenges, is that they've got evidence behind them that can support their interests and look after their interests if they suffer a detriment upon reporting. So it's every opportunity trying to give them enough tools to try and address the issue when it's reported early. And where it's not reported early, it's giving them enough tools and knowledge to build up a portfolio of information that they can rely upon to look after their own interests, to progress reporting through to appropriate authorities, and to try and deal with the situation that's ongoing in the most appropriate way for the circumstances.
Thank you, Martin. That was a very detailed, comprehensive answer. We've now only got 3 minutes left of the webinar. So apologies to everybody that we're not going to be able to get through all of the questions, but we'll take this away and try and get some answers written up and sent back to you. I have a quick question for Chris about training. The question is, neurodiversity, is this something which is also considered within training? If you've got a quick answer, that's very welcome.
Yeah, so the quick answer is yes, of course. It's a really interesting question, actually, because I wonder how many people, entry-level crew or senior-level crew, know how to deal with that and that question. Of course, it is taken into account when we are delivering training, but I also think it's something that needs to be taken into account as part of leadership training and how the people that are managing people on board vessels understand it as well. So yes, most definitely, it is taken into account from our end. We currently have a student with this as well that we are mentoring, guiding, working with to get through to get a job in the sector. So it is definitely needed, and we definitely take it into account.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, last 2 minutes, and I have a question from Karen Murphy, who says she's a counsellor based in Antibes, working primarily with yacht crew, and she finds that 99% of crew cases with issues are either fired or given the opportunity to leave and given a good reference in order to get another position, therefore allowing the cycle to continue. But actually, the problem is about substance misuse issues. So how can we encourage captains and management companies to support crew with substance misuse issues? Does anybody have an answer for that one? Tricky one, I think. Martin, you're not on mute, so I might come to you. Can you have a go of a quick answer for that? And then we're going to have to round up. Martin, we can't hear you, actually.
Okay.
Thank you.
I was on mute, it turns out. So fundamentally, it's because it's the right thing to do. That's how and why we should encourage people to look after and support those that are going through substance misuse or substance abuse challenges. It's the right thing to do. These are people that often are put into the situations that they find themselves in, owing to the level of work and performance that's expected of them. So fundamentally, it's the right thing to do, it's the proper thing to do, and you don't want to lose good crew and good people to dealing with an issue that quite often can be related to the experiences that they've gone through, or can be related to the experiences that they're having whilst working.
Thank you, Martin. We have reached the end of our time together, and I just want to say thank you to everybody. Well, big thank you to our panelists for sharing your experiences and helping us to understand more about the issues affecting crew welfare on super yachts. Some of us might think it's a glamorous life, but seems that they have their own difficulties and challenges too. There's a lot of initiatives going on across the sector, but the Changing Tack Working Group has been trying very hard to pull together these issues. And what we really do want to do at the Seafarers Charity is to enhance the awareness of crew about the support and help that's available, and also enhance the provision of initiatives and support for crew working on super yachts. I don't think there's any doubt that challenges exist. So we will be putting this all together in a follow-up email for you and sending a link to the recording and answering any unanswered questions. So thank you all very much for joining us, and thank you all very much for your time. Goodbye.